From the creators of XCOM, Midnight Suns is a tactical RPG that combines role-playing mechanics with card game mechanics to shed light on a somewhat mysterious part of the Marvel Universe. Recognizable characters like members of the Avengers join forces with a new Midnight Suns team, and together they struggle to overcome a demonic threat. I haven't quite finished the game yet, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. So in today's video, I thought it was about time I tell you some of the reasons why I love Marvel's Midnight Suns.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another Carrot Scraps video, and by another, I mean the 132nd. And as usual, I wanted to give a couple of disclaimers up front. This video is not going to be a meticulously written or scripted review. It is just going to be my honest thoughts and a little ramble that I want to give about Midnight Suns. Midnight Suns is a game that I am extremely enthusiastic about. It's a game that I was very excited about and a game that really impressed me, and a game that I'm upset I didn't make a video about yet. So I want to fix that today. I want to express it to you today and express my extreme pleasure and with this game and explain why I like it. So if I make any mistakes or get any details wrong or my opinion changes in the future, just bear with me. But in addition to that, in addition to just talking about why I like this game that I love so much, I also wanted to make it clear that I want to kind of entice people who are on the fence about Midnight Suns. I've seen a lot of people who, for one reason or another, don't want to play the game or have said that they won't play the game, and I kind of want to offer you know, an olive branch to those people, because I think a lot of Marvel fans who have decided that they don't like this game or that they wouldn't play this game for whatever reason would actually love it if they gave it a shot. So that's my other goal with this video. Anyway, without further ado, let's start talking about my thoughts on Marvel's Midnight Suns. I think I want to start by talking about characters and the world of Marvel's Midnight Suns. I love the gameplay in this game. I think the gameplay is awesome. It's gameplay that I really enjoy, but I recognize that it's not necessarily for everybody. And so I wanted to start by highlighting something that I think is a big hook for the game for most Marvel fans, and that's the version of the Marvel Universe that they decided to create. I really like the world that they have here, and I really like the way that they depict their version of these characters. Many of them feel distinctly unique, and many of them feel somewhat familiar, and a lot of them feel familiar from many different places. For example, Spider-Man being voiced by Yuri Lowenthal is an immediate, remembrance of other Marvel games, right? People who love Marvel's Spider-Man are immediately going to be caught by that detail about him, which I think is really interesting. But when you get into who he is, he reminds me a lot of the character from the comics. In fact, I think a lot of the characters in Midnight Suns and a lot of the world of Midnight Suns reminds me of the comics. It feels as if this version of the Marvel Universe takes place, I want to say maybe 10 to 12 years after comic book continuity. As somebody who's read a lot of Marvel comics and Marvel 616 comics, there's a lot of details about Midnight Suns that are familiar when they talk about their history, when these characters talk about where they've been and what they've done. In my head, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So in this world, this story is canon, and the story that they're talking about is a potential comic book story. And I feel like I don't get to see that very often when it comes to Marvel games. A lot of the times, either the continuity is solidified in a vague way, right? Like the past 8 years happened, and occasionally you'll get to know about them, but it's nothing too big. It's nothing massive. It's kind of just these vague, like, oh, I fought this person, I did this, I did that. But Midnight Suns, it feels like there's a lot that's happened. It's very dense, and that reminds me of a comic book. Or other games just start new, and they're like, this is our universe, we're starting from the beginning, we're doing this right here, which isn't the case with Midnight Suns. Again, when you talk to these characters, a big part of this game is talking to these characters, and when you talk to them, you learn a lot about who they are. Who they are is really interesting and fun to discover, but then also, for me, what's really cool is that there's just this long Marvel history behind most of them. But then you also get characters who feel either more inspired by their MCU counterparts, or more interestingly to me, they feel more unique as like this version of them is just this new version of them. For example, the Midnight Suns in general, this version of the Midnight Suns is very unique to this game, and I thought that was really cool, and it was really fun discovering that. Whereas the Avengers feel like they've been doing the Avengers thing from the comics for the past 12 years, and so it's cool to hear certain characters talk about their history. Wanda, Scarlet Witch, is another character who's really interesting in this game, and while she definitely takes inspiration from a lot of different places, I feel like she's very distinctly this character from this game, and I like that a lot. So that's like the first big thing about Midnight Suns, is the world is awesome to me because it pulls from the comics, but it also is unique, and I like discovering that. That being said, moving past like what the world is, how much of the world is another thing that I really like about it. There's just so much to this game, between expeditions where you send your character to do a mission on their own, and then they come back and you get this little paragraph about what they did and who they met. When you read the Starlink, this little social media that they created, which is one of the coolest ideas for this game to include that, and getting to read these characters talk about themselves. When you just have conversations with people and learn about their history, it really does feel like this game, the world of this game moves along without you. It feels like it's been around without you, and in that respect, it really does feel like its own tangible universe. It doesn't feel like a video game world. It feels like this world that I'm just peeking into, and if I'm not careful, I could miss some details because it's always spinning. This world is always spinning and events are always happening, and I really appreciate that. So it's not just the world, it's how much of the world there is here, how meticulously thought out the world is, and how great the world building is, and how many opportunities you have to partake in enjoying and understanding what this world is. All of that is fantastic in a way I didn't expect. I knew I was going to like this game, or at least I had a good feeling I was going to like this game. I didn't expect the world to impress me this much and to be this fantastic. There's a clear love for these characters, and I don't mean that as a slight to any other Marvel game. I hope that that's clear, but there's a clear, meticulous love for these characters here that, to me, doesn't necessarily come from a place of oh, let me put my spin on this, but more so, oh, I can't wait to show this aspect of this character that I love. I feel a lot of that. Like somebody on the team was excited to show this part of a character or that part of a character, and then occasionally throw in something new. And I think that's all really cool. And I guess the last thing I'll say about characters and world building is, again, I really like the way these characters are. I like these versions of their characters and their personality, and I like how they get along with one another. I like seeing people debate. I like seeing people frustrated with each other. I like seeing people romantically involved with each other. I used to talk about, when I would talk about why I like reading superhero comics, I would mention that I like hearing about their personal lives more than their superhero lives. I feel like that's changed a lot in recent years because I feel like more writers have catered to the more personal life driven stories, the more, oh, I'm a superhero but I also eat pizza and play D&D stuff. I feel like we've seen a lot of that recently, but at the end of the day, I still like these characters more because they're a soap opera rather than power levels, right? I like to hear about what makes them tick beyond their powers, that even though they're these massively otherworldly, powerful characters, or intelligent characters, they still have this human element that grounds them in silly stuff like arguments and selfishness and romance. And I feel like this game really nails that detail, and I love seeing these heroes in this space interact with one another. I really love seeing them be frustrated with one another. I really love seeing them be, infatuated with one another, training with one another. So much of this game really nails a part of Marvel and superheroes in general that I really love, which is this human element. And I feel like they nail it in a way that is very unique. So that's the first thing about Midnight Suns that I'm really taken by, is the characters and the world and the way they approach those details. So next, let's talk about the gameplay, and I feel like this is the most difficult part of this game for people to accept. I feel like this is the part of the game that is preventing most people from checking it out, which is super disappointing, because I really love strategy RPGs in general. I think strategy RPGs are really fun. I am happy to get a AAA strategy RPG, and I wish I saw them more, but I'm especially happy not just because of the gameplay, but because it's associated with the Marvel game. It's really cool to get that. Plus, in addition to that, it's a card game. I was very lucky to get 2 Marvel card games in the world of video games in a very short span of time, but it seems like that those 2 details about the gameplay are what are preventing a lot of people from even checking this game out, and I just think that's really disappointing in general, because I just think it's a fun style of gameplay, but especially for superhero stuff. You know, I think there's this expectation for superhero stuff that, like, all of it has to be an action brawler and all of it has to be open world. You know, you saw a lot of this with Avengers, where it was like, it's not open world, and people used that as kind of that was the reason that it's bad for everyone. And it's like, that's fine if you wanted it to be open world, but just saying it's not open world doesn't mean that it's bad for everyone. I personally liked that game was mission-based. For me, that made more sense for the Avengers, and I didn't want an open-world Avengers game. Or at least I didn't want that game to be an open-world game. I'm open to having an Avengers game that's open-world, but, you know, I wanted to see what these developers did with their style of gameplay and see what their approach was. You know, I don't like live service games. I had never really played a gear-based game before, but I was open to trying what Avengers was, and to my surprise, even though I don't like those types of games, I ended up liking Avengers a lot, right? Like, I love Avengers. And so I wish people would take the same approach with Midnight Suns when it came to strategy RPGs and card game mechanics, because most people I see, it's so weird. I'll talk about this game on Twitter and be like, oh, I love this, blah, 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 and somebody random will reply, it's still a card game, and I'm like, I know. I'm aware it is a card game. And or something like, you know, it sucks, but it's still a card game. And I'm like, I'm not, like, I'm aware that's part of what makes it cool. You know what I mean? This is part of what's interesting about it. So if I could give any advice to anyone, it would be to, you know, take a chance if you're able to, right? Like, obviously a video game costs a lot of money, so if you really don't think you're going to enjoy this style of gameplay, definitely don't spend the money on it. But I don't know, I feel like in the world of Marvel games, we're getting so many Marvel games now, I feel like I want these games to experiment with gameplay more, you know? I don't want every Marvel game to play exactly the same. I like that the number of games that I have right now, there are slight to vast differences that cause me to play them more. And I think the games that are more different, I end up playing, you know, more frequently than the games that are more similar. Anyway, so with that out of the way, let's just talk about me liking the gameplay. So it's a strategy RPG, and I love it. I was worried that I wouldn't like it. Typically, with strategy RPGs, I like the grid system. I'm a big Fire Emblem fan, right? I like to see... I like that there's this strict movement put out for you. And I'm not the biggest XCOM fan, honestly, and I'm not sure exactly why that was, but I think the fact that it wasn't grid-based and that movement was a little bit more loose, I feel like that wasn't something that I was a huge fan of. And so it was something that I was very worried about with Midnight Suns, and to my surprise, I loved it. It wasn't a hindrance at all. I think the non-grid based movement works really well. I think the freedom is pretty cool, especially when it comes to the way I navigate in this world. I love the way that I interact with the environment, and the way that I can toss enemies into environmental hazards, or, you know, use the environment to hurt enemies. I think all of that is really cool and really interesting. So, and I think that's aided by the fact that it's, you know, not on a grid system. So I was surprised by that, but pleasantly so. I feel like it really works. You know, I took a risk playing something that I was apprehensive about, and it paid off in the long run. Something else that I was apprehensive about was teams of 3. I am used to having much larger teams when it comes to my strategy RPGs, and I was nervous about that, but in the end, I have no problem with the teams of 3 system, and also with the fact that you typically need to take the hunter with you. That's the main character that you use. That is your player character. I actually really loved the hunter, and especially in combat. So even when I wasn't forced to use them, I was still excited to have them be a part of my team. And my 3-person teams worked really well. I liked the way that they worked, and sometimes I felt a little overwhelmed, but I feel like that challenge is part of the fun, right? Is finding yourself in over your head, but you're a superhero and you're gonna figure out a way, to get out of this one together, using your power, but also your wit. Fighting is awesome in this game. First of all, let's talk about the cards. Like, the way that attacks are built around, this deck. You get these cards for each of your characters, and then drawing attacks and kind of status effect cards each turn. And some cards build heroism, and heroism can be used to to play other cards. That whole system is really cool. It feels like I'm always able to do something as long as I'm thinking smart. So there definitely is a way for you to not play, right? To paint yourself into a corner. But if you're playing correctly, I think most of the time you have something to do every turn, which I think is really important. But the developers talked about how this system felt like it mimicked a superhero fight from the comics where anything could happen, and I couldn't agree more. Like, I really do like this kind of random element where you have these abilities, but it does feel like something could happen to change your odds, or to level the playing field, or to create an unfair advantage. That stuff is really interesting, and I feel like that helps with the role-playing side of things. But then when it comes to just attacking, the visual animations for these attacks are beautiful. It looks incredible, and it feels, I think it's a combination of the animations, but also the sound effects and the sound design and the sound mixing. Especially like with Iron Man and Doctor Strange, they really hit hard and they punch hard when you put down a card, when you lay down an attack. And I don't know, I'm always excited. I'm always very hype when one of my characters knocks out a Hydra agent. It feels very, definitive. I don't know. It's exciting. It hurts. I'm like, ooh, like I really hit that person. And that feels really great. And I think that's helpful for people, again, who aren't as into these kinds of games. When they see the result of their, card play, it doesn't feel as detached from them, or it doesn't feel, as, it feels like they're more of a participant because of how hard they hit. And I think that's really cool. Now, I wanted to talk about certain characters that I like, and I guess I could have put that in the previous section, but I think it makes more sense to put that here. The characters that I really love in this game are Blade, Iron Man, and Doctor Strange. I feel like those are the 3 characters that I like the most. Even though, like, Magic, Ileana Rasputin, is a character, she's like my 4th favorite superhero ever. She's my favorite mutant. I love that character so much, and I'm always, I wish that she got more play, and here she is, and yet I feel way more drawn to Iron Man and Doctor Strange, even though I'm not the biggest Iron Man or Doctor Strange fan, you know what I mean? Even though I'm not the biggest Blade fan, these are the characters that I'm really drawn to in this game, and part of it is the way that they're depicted. I think all 3 of those characters are depicted really well, and Ileana is as well. There are no characters that I dislike, but I think I'm just surprised by how much I like Tony and Doctor Strange. I feel like there's something about the way that they're depicted here versus the way I've seen them in movies recently and even comics, where I'm just like, wow, this is a cool version of this character. I miss seeing this version of this character, and so they're very exciting. But I think beyond that, there's also the combination of gameplay, and that's why I'm talking about this here. Unfortunately, I tried playing with Ileana immediately, and look, I'll admit, I'm probably just not good at the game, but I just wasn't great at playing with this character, and I tried, and she takes a little getting used to, and the thing is, I don't need her to play differently. I think she's cool. I've seen other people love playing as this character. She is a really inventive and unique and interesting character from a gameplay perspective, and I love that she is included in the game for that reason. I like that not every character is just a really good puncher, right? That some characters have a really interesting philosophy to the way that you use them. But that being said, I'm not great at it, and I put my time in to try. Maybe my next playthrough, I'll try, Ileana and Nico Miko's another character I absolutely love from the comics. I love the Runaways. And I do love her in this game as well, but when it comes to gameplay, I'm just not as taken by her. Not because she's bad, but because it's just not my style of gameplay at the moment. You know what I mean? And so maybe next playthrough I'll switch it up a little bit more. But typically I stick to Blade, Iron Man, and Doctor Strange. And again, that's a combination of me being surprised by how much I like their characters, their people, skills, their personality in the game, but also how much I love their gameplay. I really, really love seeing them on the field. I really think they punch hard. I really like their abilities. I really like chaining their abilities. And so oftentimes I'm using those three. Other characters I really like are Captain Marvel and Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, right? The Scarlet Spider is my favorite superhero, but Spider-Man in general is my favorite superhero. But I'm always nervous about having the control of Spider-Man in a video game. I think I've mentioned this before on the channel, but I'm always nervous about this, especially when it comes to ensemble games. There's something about Spider-Man in ensemble games that sometimes just doesn't hit for me. And in Avengers, I was really happy and pleased with how Spider-Man plays. And again, I was nervous in Midnight Suns, but I actually really loved the way he plays as well. And he's another character that I really love putting on my team. If it wasn't for the fact that I love the other four characters that I mentioned, I'd have Spider-Man on my team way more, because he has some really fun abilities, especially abilities that you can chain together. And he's just a great looking character. I really like the way he's designed. So, and then Captain Marvel. Again, Captain Marvel is a really powerful character. And I feel like her character in the game, again, still good, but more what I expected from her, more what I've seen in other parts of Marvel storytelling, in other Marvel media. So I'm not as surprised by her storytelling, but her gameplay is fantastic, and that's like the main thing that I really like about her. So that puts her lower than the other three that I mentioned. But characters and the way that they play, they are fantastic. I enjoy them a lot, and I got to imagine if you check out the game, you're going to enjoy playing with them as well. And I think the last thing I wanted to mention about combat gameplay specifically is I like the system of upgrading your cards. I like the system that is in place for improving the skills for these characters. I feel like there's a lot of movement and creativity there, especially when combined with the other forms of gameplay in the game. And it may not be a part of the game that I dig into as deep, right? Like, I think I'm probably going to dig more into the surface level of the combat, and where I dig deep is more so into the world building and the characters. But seeing a lot of people really get into the aspect of, stats and upgrading their cards, I feel like that stuff is really cool, and I love that that stuff is there. And I think that could be interesting for certain people who aren't aware that that's a big part of the game. In addition to that, the other details that can help you boost yourself for the next combat encounter, right? I think that's really cool. I like that there's a lot in place there, whether it's, training or stuff like that, that will make certain characters more powerful. Also, the injury system was something I was really surprised by, where a character can just be taken out, for a couple days of real-time gameplay. Not my real days, but like in-game days. And I thought that was really cool and a great way to mesh the role-playing elements of the game with the combat elements of the game, and also force me, somebody who really does want to just use the same characters, to try out new characters. And if I don't try out new characters, kind of get punished for it. I think that's really cool, and it works for me. And again, it works to make the game more cohesive. And somewhat unrelated, I just wanted to circle back around to environments. I really do love the environments in this game. I think the environments are beautiful. I think the particle effects are gorgeous. When things explode, it's just such a wonderful moment. I love seeing things blow up in this game, and seeing the rubble and the hearing the sound effects of the rubble, but also interacting with the environments, I think, is one of the coolest parts of combat here. It again really helps with the superhero fantasy, throwing somebody into something, destroying some kind of machinery, just punching someone into a wall and having that wall participate in the damage that was dealt. I think that's all really creative and really cool. So in general, I love the gameplay. It is better than I thought it would be. I already like strategy RPGs, but I did have some, again, concerns going into this game, but luckily when I played the game, I didn't need to be concerned, because the gameplay is fantastic. It's incredible. I love it, and I know it's not for everybody, and that's totally fine. It might not be for everyone, right? But I encourage people to give it a try, if if they're willing to. If you like other things about the game, maybe if it's on sale, or if you're just financially able to take a risk. If you're a Marvel fan, I encourage you to take the chance. If gameplay is the only thing holding you back and you do want to play this game, because first of all, I think the gameplay is awesome, and second of all, I think it's fun to try out a new style of game. So I can't recommend the game for its gameplay enough. It is a fantastic aspect of Midnight Suns. Now, before I wrap things up, I wanted to talk about two other things that I really love about this game, and that is costume design, and then the other types of gameplay that you can find in Midnight Suns. So let's start with costume design really quickly, and just design in general. I really love the way the costumes look in this game. It's one of my favorite things about Midnight Suns. I think that there is a want to quote-unquote ground or add realism to costumes and superhero designs, both in superhero movies and in video games. Adding, tech stuff and adding all these little lines and, doing armor instead of spandex. And sometimes that's cool. Sometimes that's awesome. You know what I mean? The Ends of the Earth Spider-Man costume from the comics is one of my favorite costumes in Spider-Man history. But in general, I have a preference for spandex. I like to see spandex. I like to see these sillier costumes. I like to see these bright, saturated costumes instead of these muted colors. It's something that I honestly talk about all the time, and I'm constantly thinking about. See, if you're familiar with me, you've heard me speak about this before. While armor designs aren't bad, I definitely there's a frequency with them that I'm not the biggest fan of, and in this game I really do think there's a great mix and balance of costumes that make me really happy as somebody who likes that kind of stuff. Getting to see a lot of spandex, getting to see a lot of bright saturated colors, and then also getting to see some armor and getting to see some kind of more over the top, meticulously detailed suits. I think there's a really cool range of designs in this game, and it's one of my favorite things about Midnight Suns. It really is, getting to look at these characters and see they are definitely comic book characters. They're not just wearing some leather suit mixed with armor. Like, they are a superhero right here, and they're dressed a little silly, and that's part of what makes them cool. I can't say it enough. I'm really, really impressed by the way most of these costumes look, and even their variant costumes, even their other skins, alternative skins, have been really fantastic. So one of my favorite parts of the game, hands down. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the other part of the gameplay in Midnight Suns. Debatably, something that is half of the game. It's not just a side part of the game, it's a huge element of Midnight Suns, and that's the role-playing and social gameplay in the game. It reminds me a lot of Fire Emblem Three Houses, where a lot of your time is spent in combat, and sometimes combat encounters take a very long time, but then for the rest of the time, you're on a campus, talking to other people, trying to socialize, trying to understand people, progress your relationships with them, learn more about the world and about your friends and about your allies, and getting certain bonuses because of that, or just learning more about the world that you exist in and the world that you inhabit. It reminds me a lot of Fire Emblem Three Houses in that way, and I think it's done really well in Midnight Suns, and I think it is a very interesting and cool part of the game. Again, they really knocked it out of the park on combat, and yet still did a really great job with the writing and the approach to socializing in the role-playing elements. I've mentioned it before. If you know anything about me, I love Fallout, I love branching pathways, I love dialogue trees like this, and I think there are some really cool dialogue trees available for you. I like the different options that you have to get to know people, to upset people, to become closer with others. I like that there are different ways to communicate with others. There are different clubs and groups for you to join. It just feels very lived in, and it feels very exciting. I will say that sometimes it can be a little daunting to sit down and have to, be like, oh, I'm not sitting down for combat, I'm sitting down for dialogue, or I'm not sitting down for dialogue, I'm sitting down for combat. Whereas like if I'm playing a game like Avengers, it's pretty consistent, right? If I'm gonna play Avengers, it's always gonna be, here I go, I'm going to be playing just fighting in this mission really quickly. That's the fun of a game like that. You know, I call it kind of a beat 'em up. It's an arcade style game to me. Here it's a little bit different, so you know, you kind of do have to be prepared for whatever part of the gameplay that you're at, right? Depending on what part of the story you're at, or depending on what part of the mission you're at, or whatever. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't necessarily want to talk to people tonight, so I guess I'll play something else. But other than that, I think it's done really well. Other than that, I think it's really exciting, and I think it's really interesting. Other than that, I feel like you know, the role-playing elements are really cool. Again, I love getting to know these characters, these versions of these characters, through talking to them. And more than anything else, I also really like the player character. I think they did a really good job creating your own character, and designing them, and kind of deciding who they are, whether they're good, whether they're bad, what they're going to say and what they're not going to say. I feel very close to my hunter. And I really like the way that they interact with others, and I like the relationships that they've formed. And a lot of that is just from the care that was put into this part of the gameplay. So again, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely check out Midnight Suns, because I think it's a big part of this game. I have a friend who's really into games like this, you know, kind of role-playing, you know, social gameplay-driven video games. And when she asked me if you know, she would be interested in Midnight Suns, I said immediately, like, you would love this. Even they like strategy RPGs, but even if they didn't like strategy RPGs, I think this element of gameplay, this socializing, is so good and it's so prevalent that even if you're not into the combat, it's still a big draw for the game. It's still really interesting. So I can't say enough, again, how much Midnight Suns knocked it out of the park on the various types of gameplay that are included in the game. So those are my thoughts on Midnight Suns. I think the game is absolutely fantastic, like I've already said, and I hope that's clear in this video. It is a really impressive game that checks off a number of personal, you know, qualifications that I just like about games, a lot of personal interests that I just have in video games, and a lot of personal you know, interests that I just have in Marvel. It is a really weird Marvel dream game for me. Again, this and Midnight Suns are two games that came out around the same time that are just weird, like singing to my soul Marvel games. I love Marvel's Avengers. Marvel's Avengers has been my favorite Marvel game for a very long time now, and I still love it. I think it's incredible, but I didn't go into it expecting to love it as much as I did. It was a game that I was kind of surprised at how much I loved, and I do love it. But this game, you know, Midnight Suns really does like sing to my soul when it comes to, you know, it being a strategy RPG, it having card game mechanics, the style of design for the costumes, the types of characters that they chose, the world that they've depicted, and the lore that they're pulling from. Almost everything in this game, it feels like it's catered to me and my interests, and so it's so exciting. But that being said, I think a lot of other people would be very interested in it. If for some reason you're not aware of Midnight Suns, and you just checked it out through this video, definitely check it out. And if you are aware of Midnight Suns but you've been on the fence because of the gameplay, again, like I said, don't go spending money on a game that you don't think you'll enjoy if you don't have the disposable income for it. Definitely not a smart idea. But if you do have the disposable income, and the gameplay is the only thing holding you back, I encourage you to give it a try, because everything else in this game is fantastic. And at the end of the day, I think it's fun to try a new game with some new gameplay, you know, to experience the Marvel Universe in a new way, right? I think, you know, it's kind of like if you like the MCU movies, but you don't necessarily like TV shows, a lot of MCU fans checked out the TV shows and they're like, you know what, I actually ended up liking this show, even though I don't typically watch, you know, these streaming shows. I typically stick to movies. It's kind of like that. You know, you might not be into this kind of gameplay, but who knows? Maybe you'll enjoy it once you try it out. So I can't recommend it enough. I think Midnight Suns is fantastic, and I'm definitely going to be talking about it more in the future. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. video. I want to thank you so much for watching. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. As regular viewers know, I make a variety of content on my channel, and I'm always going to make the videos that I want to make. But if you see something you like, make sure to let me know, and I'll try to prioritize that kind of content in the future. Over on Twitch, I typically play superhero games like Marvel's Avengers, Marvel's Snap, Midnight Suns, and Gotham Knights, with the occasional horror game like Resident Evil. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/carrotscraps. And as a quick reminder, on Friday, February 10th, that should be this Friday, I'll be streaming with the Gamers for Trans Rights event. It is a really awesome event that is going to be benefiting a great cause. I'm really excited about it, and I'm just excited to create a positive environment. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, make sure to check it out. And all my other social media, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are at carrotscraps as well. So I want to thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Literally, right as I was finishing this video, Midnight Suns announced that they basically are releasing somewhat of a demo, or a way for you to play the first couple of hours of the game, and that couldn't fit better with this video, so you have no excuse at all. There's no excuses left. I won't hear anyone, even if you don't want to play the game, even if you don't like Marvel, even if you hate video games, even if you don't live on this planet, you have no excuse. There's not a single excuse. I just won't hear it.